A royal problem. The castle grounds buzzed like an agitated hive. Footmen in scarlet livery scurried between clusters of formally dressed guests. The air, thick with the scent of 1,000 roses and nervous anticipation, vibrated with the distant strains of a string quartet tuning their instruments. Anya, however, heard none of it. She sat rigid in the back of the vintage Rolls-Royce, its cream leather upholstery cool against her trembling hands. Outside, her personal guard, Captain Reese, a man whose face seemed permanently carved from granite, leaned into the driver's window, his voice a low rumble Anya could barely make out. The driver, a portly man named Mr. Peterson who usually ferried dignitaries with practiced ease, was now sweating profusely, his face the color of overripe tomatoes. "It simply won't turn over, Captain," Mr. Peterson said, his voice laced with panic. "I've tried everything." Anya closed her eyes, a wave of nausea washing over her. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not today. Perhaps flooded? Reese suggested, his voice calm, yet a subtle crease had appeared between his brows. "I've checked, Captain. Spark plugs, fuel line, nothing." The minutes ticked by, each one an agonizing hammer blow against Anya's composure. The wedding was scheduled to begin in half an hour. Half an hour to publicly declare her devotion to a man she barely knew, a man chosen for her, not by her. She risked a peek through the tinted window. The meticulously arranged crowd, a sea of glittering tiaras and perfectly tailored suits, seemed to shimmer in the late morning sun. They were waiting, expecting, and she, Princess Anya, was trapped. "Get someone!" Anya finally burst out, her voice sharper than she intended. Both men turned, surprised. She rarely raised her voice. "Get anyone who knows anything about engines. Now!" Reese, ever the pragmatist, barked an order into his wrist calm. "I need a mechanic immediately. The princess's transport is delayed. Priority 1. Anya fiddled with the intricate lace of her sleeve, her gaze darting around the manicured gardens. Every sculpted bush, every perfectly placed statue, seemed to mock her predicament. She longed to be anywhere but here. Anywhere where she could breathe freely, make her own choices, and not be suffocated by duty and expectation. Another 5 minutes crawled by. The string quartet had begun playing a light, airy waltz, its cheerful melody a jarring counterpoint to Anya's mounting anxiety. Mr. Peterson continued to tinker under the hood, his grunts of frustration punctuated by the occasional curse. Reese approached the car again, his face grim. "They're trying to locate someone, Your Highness. But with the castle security locked down for the wedding, getting anyone through the gates is proving difficult." Difficult? Of course, it was difficult. Everything was always difficult when it came to her. Anya clenched her fists. She couldn't do this. She wouldn't. But what choice did she have? To refuse would bring scandal, shame, and potentially destabilize the kingdom. Her duty, as always, loomed over her like a suffocating blanket. Suddenly, a frantic voice crackled from Reese's wrist calm. "Captain, we have a possible. A local mechanic claims he knows his way around older models. He's at the south gate, but security is hesitant to let him through without proper clearance." "Get him here," Anya commanded, her voice surprisingly firm. "Clearance be damned. Just get him here now." Marco to the rescue. Marco cursed under his breath, wrench slipping in his greasy hand. Another late night. He wrestled with the stubborn bolt on a battered Fiat, the metal groaning in protest. The garage, barely bigger than the car itself, was a chaotic symphony of tools, spare parts, and the pervasive scent of oil and gasoline. He wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of grime. Tonight, it seemed, the Fiat was winning. A frantic rapping on the corrugated iron door startled him. He squinted, recognizing young Pietro, the baker's son, his face flushed crimson. Marco, you gotta come. Now." "Pietro? What's wrong? Is your father all right?" Pietro gasped for air, words tumbling out. "It's the princess. Her motorcar. It won't start. They need you. At the castle." Marco stared, dumbfounded. Princess Isolde, the wedding of the century, and they needed him? A grease-stained mechanic from the village? He swallowed hard, the image of the castle, a distant fairy tale silhouette against the hills, flashing in his mind. "But I only fix Fiats and tractors, Pietro. Surely they have a royal mechanics." They tried. Everyone. But nothing. "The wedding is tomorrow and the princess is, well, just come. Please, Marco. It's urgent." Thou nodded him. He pictured himself, clumsy and out of place, surrounded by pomp and circumstance. But the desperation in Pietro's voice, the image of the stranded princess, spurred him into action. He grabbed his toolbox, a worn leather satchel overflowing with familiar instruments, and followed Pietro out into the night. The contrast hit him like a physical blow. One moment he was trudging along the familiar dirt road, the scent of wood smoke in the air. The next, he was standing before the castle gates, bathed in the warm glow of countless lanterns. The air hummed with music, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Servants in pristine uniforms hurried past, their faces etched with controlled excitement. The sheer scale of the preparations was overwhelming. Pietro led him through a labyrinth of manicured gardens, each more extravagant than the last. Marble statues gleamed in the moonlight, fountains gurgled musically, and exotic flowers released a heady perfume. Finally, they reached a courtyard where a sleek, silver automobile sat forlornly beneath a silk awning. It was a machine of breathtaking beauty, a far cry from the humble vehicles he usually coaxed back to life. A small group of anxious faces surrounded it, their elegant attire a stark contrast to Marco's worn overalls. He felt a knot of apprehension tighten in his stomach. He was definitely out of his depth. Sparks and solutions. Marco circled the gleaming vehicle, a low whistle escaping his lips. Magnificent, he muttered, more to himself than Anya. He crouched, peering under the chassis, his brow furrowed in concentration. All right, let's see what we've got. Anya watched him, perched on a nearby boulder. The silk of her gown felt strangely out of place against the rough stone. Marco moved with a confident grace that belied his earlier awkwardness. He propped the hood open, the engine his new focus. The air, thick with the scent of pine and wildflowers, now carried the metallic tang of oil and hot metal. Looks like a fuel line issue, he announced after a few minutes, his voice muffled by the engine's innards. He emerged, wiping his hands on a rag pulled from his back pocket, a smudge of grease adorning his cheek. Probably rattled loose on this enthusiastic road. He glanced at Anya, a sheepish grin playing on his lips. Anya found herself smiling back. Enthusiastic is one word for it. Marco retrieved a small toolkit from his battered truck. His movements were precise and efficient as he worked, his fingers dancing over the engine parts with a familiarity that spoke of countless hours spent tinkering. The sounds of the forest, birdsong, and the rustle of leaves faded into the background, replaced by the click of wrenches and the gentle rasp of metal against metal. Anya was captivated. Back in the palace, problems were solved with hushed conferences and endless paperwork. Here, a solution was being forged with ingenuity and grease-stained hands. She noticed the way his brow furrowed in concentration, the subtle flex of his muscles as he tightened a bolt. There was an honesty in his focus, a dedication she rarely encountered. She felt a pull towards him, an acknowledgement of something real amidst a world of carefully constructed facades. Almost there, Marco said, his voice tight with concentration. He connected the final fuel line, then double-checked his work. Taking a deep breath, he turned the key. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then roared to life. The sound echoed through the forest, a triumphant symphony of combustion. Anya felt a wave of relief wash over her. It was more than just getting the car running, it was a sense of escape, of possibility. Marco stepped back, wiping his hands on the rag again, a relieved smile spreading across his face. That should do it, though I recommend sticking to paved roads from now on. He looked at Anya, his eyes sparkling with pride. You fixed it, Anya said, stating the obvious, but unable to articulate the depth of her gratitude. You really fixed it. A heart in doubt. The cathedral dripped with gold. Sunlight, fractured by stained glass saints, painted the aisle in kaleidoscopic patterns. Anya, a statue in ivory silk, felt none of the warmth. The organ swelled, its notes vibrating through the ancient stone and up into her very bones, a hollow echo of what should have been joy. Stefan stood at the altar, a handsome figurehead in his royal blue uniform. His smile, usually so dazzling, seemed brittle, rehearsed. He caught her eye, and she offered a small, practiced smile in return, the kind she'd been perfecting since childhood. It felt like another layer of the heavy brocade weighing her down. As she walked, each step a carefully measured beat against the marble floor, memories flickered like dying embers. Marco, his hands stained with grease, a smudge of it permanently etched on his cheek. Marco, patiently explaining the intricacies of an engine, his eyes alight with passion. Marco, offering her a genuine, unguarded smile that reached all the way to his soul. The scent of lilies, thick and cloying, filled the air. It reminded her of funerals, of forced solemnity. She pictured Marco, instead, smelling of oil and metal and the faint sweetness of the pastries he always brought for their clandestine meetings in the garage. Her father, the king, waited at the end of the aisle, his face stern and unyielding. He presented her to Stefan, a transaction completed. A princess traded for political stability. Dearly beloved, the archbishop intoned, his voice booming. Anya focused on the intricate embroidery of the altar cloth, anything to avoid Stefan's touch, the weight of his hand in hers. It felt cold, possessive, not like the brief, accidental brushes of hands she'd shared with Marco, sparks that had ignited a fire she now desperately tried to smother. She remembered the day Marco had finally confessed his feelings, his voice rough with uncertainty. "Princess, I know it's improper, but I can't pretend anymore." He hadn't offered her a kingdom or a title, only his honest heart, a heart that beat with a rhythm so different from the measured cadence of courtly life. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back, forcing a swallow. The archbishop continued, droning on about duty and tradition. Anya felt a rising panic, a suffocating sense of being trapped. Stefan squeezed her hand. "Are you all right, my dear?" he whispered, his voice smooth, but his eyes held a glint of impatience. He probably thought she was simply overwhelmed by the spectacle. He wouldn't understand the turmoil raging within her. She looked at him, really looked at him. He was everything she was supposed to want. Handsome, powerful, a prince. But there was no spark, no connection, only a cold, calculated ambition. The archbishop paused, his gaze fixed on Anya. "Do you, Princess Anya, take Prince Stefan to be your lawfully wedded husband?" The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Anya's heart hammered against her ribs, a desperate bird trying to escape its gilded cage. She opened her mouth, and the word that formed was not the one expected, not the one she had rehearsed for years. It was a whisper, barely audible, but filled with a truth she could no longer deny. "No." The unspoken plea. The light filtering through the stained glass windows painted the chapel in hues of reverence and obligation. Anya, draped in ivory silk, felt neither. The heavy fabric felt like a shroud, each embroidered pearl a tiny weight pressing her down. Beside her, Prince Stefan radiated confidence, his hand warm and reassuring on hers. But Anya saw only a polite mask, a reflection of the duty they both were about to embrace. "Princess Anya," intoned the archbishop, his voice echoing through the expectant silence, "do you take Prince Stefan to be your lawfully wedded husband?" The question hung in the air. Anya's throat constricted. The scent of lilies, usually a comfort, felt cloying. She saw her mother's anxious face in the front row, her father's stoic nod. Years of preparation, of expectation, coalesced into the single, suffocating moment. She began, her voice a breath. A lifetime of obedience urged her forward. The weight of the crown, though not yet hers, pressed upon her head. "I do." The words felt like ash in her mouth. A wave of dizziness washed over her. She swayed, clutching Stefan's hand tighter. "Stefan," she whispered, so low only he could hear, I can't do this." His perfect smile faltered, confusion flickering in his eyes. "Anya? What is it?" "I don't love you," she confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I never will. This is wrong. For both of us." His grip tightened, a hint of steel beneath the polished surface. "Anya, don't be absurd. This is just nerves." But she had already made her decision. The unspoken plea in her heart had finally found its voice. She ripped her hand from his. The sound echoed, sharp and decisive, in the stunned silence. A gasp rippled through the chapel. Her mother rose, her face a mask of horror. Anya ignored them all. She lifted the heavy skirt of her gown and ran. Down the aisle, past the shocked faces, out into the sunlight. The chapel doors slammed shut behind her, muffling the uproar. She didn't stop running until she reached the edge of the palace gardens, her breath ragged, tears streaming down her face. The elaborate wedding shoes pinched her feet, but she dared not slow. Freedom was a heady, terrifying taste. She spotted a gap in the high stone wall, half hidden by overgrown ivy. Without a second thought, she squeezed through, the rough stone scraping against her silk gown. On the other side lay not the manicured lawns of the palace, but a dusty road leading away from everything she had ever known. An unexpected offer. The reek of fuel and hot iron permeated the garage. Marco, scrubbing at his hands with a greasy cloth, was lost in the bowels of the ridiculously lavish wedding limousine. He scrutinized the engine's vitals, fluids, connections, chasing a perfection he suspected wouldn't touch his own life. A stifled sob broke the spell of mechanical quiet. Marco snapped upright, narrowly missing the hood. Princess Anya stood a few feet away, her usual regal composure dissolved. Her eyes were swollen, mascara marring her face in a way that only highlighted her fragility. Sunlight, shafting through the garage's arched entrance, snagged on wisps of her meticulously arranged hair. "Marco." The word was a breath. He swallowed, suddenly awkward. "Your Highness. Is everything all right?" The answer was etched in the tremor of her chin, clinging to her like the gossamer threads of her gown. Fresh tears welled, carving paths through the makeup on her cheeks. She twisted her hands, the colossal diamond on her ring flashing like a desperate beacon. "No. Nothing is." A shuddering breath. "Marco, I need something from you." He frowned, perplexed. "Of course, Your Highness. Name it." He'd realigned the distributor, buffed the chrome to a mirror sheen, anything within his grasp. She edged closer, voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "I need you to help me. Escape." The rag tumbled from Marco's fingers, landing silently on the polished floor. He stared, dumbstruck. "Escape? But the wedding." "I can't go through with it," she blurted, the words tumbling out. "I can't marry him. I thought I could shoulder it. Convinced myself it was the responsible course. But it's not. It's a gilded cage, Marco. I'm suffocating." He knew he should be reminding her of duty, detailing the fallout of such rebellion. But seeing her stripped bare, her unhappiness palpable, choked off the reprimand. He saw not a princess, but a woman imprisoned. "I know it's a tremendous ask," she pressed, her voice edged with desperation. "But you're genuine, Marco. The only person I feel I can trust. You know automobiles. You know how to vanish." He glanced at the limousine, its flawless exterior now a cruel parody. The keys glinted on the workbench, a siren call. He could envision it, the two of them hurtling away, leaving behind the spectacle, the expectations, the chains. It was madness. Complete, utter madness. Then he met Anya's gaze, saw the hope glimmering through the tears. He saw a plea for liberation, a hunger for authenticity. And something deep within him, a chord he hadn't known existed, resonated. He hesitated, his thoughts a whirlwind. But where would we even go? A ghost of a smile played on her lips, the first genuine expression he'd witnessed all day. "Anywhere," she declared, her voice gaining strength. "Just not here. The escape. You want me to spring you?" Marco stammered, the wrench slipping from his grasp to bounce against the stones. The plea, delivered with such naked desperation, hit him like a live wire. He darted a nervous look around the courtyard, still a hive of prenuptial activity. Impassive guards stood like statues in their finery, servers scurried past laden with delicacies. This was sheer lunacy. Anya's eyes, glistening with unshed tears, begged him for salvation. "Please, Marco. I can't go through with this. I can't marry him." He saw the stark terror etched there, a fear that resonated with his own ingrained rebellion against injustice. He'd always bristled at the sight of anyone cornered, be it a trapped animal or a soul in despair. And Anya. Anya was a songbird trapped in a gilded cage. A knot formed in his stomach. This was sheer madness. He, Marco Bellini, a greasy-handed mechanic from the city's underbelly, about to abet a princess's flight from her own wedding. He swallowed, his mouth suddenly parched. A swarm of doubts buzzed in his head. Capture? Ruin? But one glance at Anya banished the anxieties. "All right," he conceded, the word a mere breath. A spark of hope flared in Anya's gaze. "Truly? You'll aid me?" He nodded, a rush of adrenaline surging through his veins. "Get in the car." Without hesitation, Anya gathered the voluminous silk of her gown and, with unexpected grace, vanished into the back of the limousine. Heart pounding a frantic tattoo against his ribs, Marco swiftly tightened the final bolt, tossed his wrench into his toolbox, and slid behind the wheel. The engine roared to life, the sudden clamor slicing through the momentary quiet that had descended upon the courtyard. He slammed the gearshift into drive, flooring the accelerator. Tires shrieked a protest as the limousine surged forward, narrowly avoiding a floral display. A wave of astonishment washed over the assembled crowd. Prince Stefan, magnificent in his ceremonial attire, stood motionless, jaw slack. The meticulously arranged guests gaped in stunned silence as the wedding car, bride still aboard, hurtled towards the open gates. Leaning forward, Anya's voice was tight with urgency. "Drive faster." He needed no further prompting. Marco threaded the car through the bewildered throng, deaf to the shouts and cries erupting in their wake. A quick glance in the rearview mirror revealed the prince finally snapping out of his daze, his face a mask of incandescent fury. They were free. Wind buffeted Anya's hair as they rocketed away from the palace, leaving behind a scene of shattered composure and dashed expectations. A simple life. Dust billowed behind Marco's battered Fiat as it rattled down the unpaved road. Anya gripped the worn leather of the passenger seat, her silken gown now coated in a fine layer of grime. The anxiety that had been a tight knot in her stomach began to loosen with each kilometer they put between her and the palace. The road opened into a small valley, revealing a cluster of terracotta-roofed houses nestled amongst olive groves. This was Marco's village. Children stopped their games of tag to stare, their eyes wide with curiosity. An elderly woman, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, waved from her doorway, calling out something in rapid Italian that Anya couldn't understand. Marco grinned. "Welcome to Belamonte." Population, mostly related. He pulled up outside a small, whitewashed house with a vine-covered trellis. The air smelled of baking bread and honeysuckle. A woman, wiping her hands on a flour-dusted apron, emerged from the house, her face lighting up when she saw Marco. She rushed forward and enveloped him in a hug, chattering excitedly. "Mama, this is Anya," Marco said, gesturing towards her. Marco's mother, Sophia, turned her warm gaze on Anya. Her initial surprise melted into a welcoming smile. She pulled Anya into an embrace, murmuring in Italian. Even though Anya didn't understand the words, she understood the sentiment. It was a welcome she hadn't expected. Over the next few days, Anya was absorbed into the rhythm of village life. Mornings began with the crowing of roosters and the smell of strong coffee. She helped Sophia in the kitchen, learning to roll pasta and make simple tomato sauce. At the garage, Marco showed her the basics of engine repair. Her manicured nails became stained with grease and her delicate hands acquired calluses. The work was hard, unfamiliar, but strangely satisfying. There was a tangible reward in coaxing a sputtering engine back to life, a stark contrast to the empty rituals of court. Evenings were spent around a long wooden table, sharing meals with Marco's family and friends. Laughter filled the air, stories were told, and wine flowed freely. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Anya found herself sitting on the porch with Marco. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the olive trees. "Thank you," she said softly, "for bringing me here." Marco shrugged, his gaze fixed on the distant hills. "This isn't much compared to what you're used to." Anya shook her head. "It's more. It's real. Before, everything was a performance. Here, people are just themselves." She paused, a shadow passing over her face. "I don't know how long I can stay, but I'm grateful for this time. A new beginning." Anya discovered a joy in Marco's company that had been conspicuously absent within the palace's ornate walls. He saw past the princess facade, recognizing Anya, a woman brimming with aspirations and vulnerabilities, equally adept at roadside repairs and finding beauty in the Tuscan sunset. As they labored on his aged Fiat, ostensibly smoothing out the dent from her impetuous departure, their hands met, gazes lingered, and a hesitant fondness took root. She absorbed his fervor for internal combustion, his profound devotion to family, and his simple pleasure in a perfectly pulled espresso. In return, he glimpsed her resilient spirit, her incisive wit, and the profound solitude that had shadowed her privileged existence. "This is utter lunacy," she breathed one evening, perched beside him on the garage's stone steps, a blend of motor oil and wildflower scents swirling around them. "Fleeing like this. Being with you." He clasped her hand, his work-worn fingers surprisingly tender. "Perhaps, but madness can be exquisitely beautiful, Anya. Sometimes it's the singular route to genuine fulfillment." The opulent wedding became a distant memory, a ghost eclipsed by Marco's comforting reality. Of course, they couldn't simply vanish into thin air. The Kingsguard hunted for her, a constant, ominous presence threatening their fragile peace. Marco envisioned a solution, an intimate, private ceremony, a binding promise that would afford Anya some legal standing and legitimize their bond in the eyes of the villagers who had embraced her wholeheartedly. The wedding preparations became a whirlwind of delight. Mama Bellini, initially startled, welcomed Anya as her own daughter, inundating her with motherly wisdom and time-honored recipes. The village's elderly seamstress, her fingers dancing with practiced grace, fashioned a simple gown from ivory linen, embroidered with delicate wildflowers. The local baker crafted a cake, its layers infused with golden honey and sun-ripened berries. The ceremony unfolded in the village square, sheltered by the vast canopy of an ancient olive tree. The atmosphere vibrated with the soft chatter of well-wishers, the fragrance of rosemary and lavender hanging in the air, and the exuberant melodies of a village band. Anya, luminous in her unadorned dress, moved toward Marco, her heart near bursting. He stood waiting, his gaze holding a love that outshone any royal jewels. As they exchanged vows, not in formal Latin, but in impassioned Italian, Anya understood she had unearthed her true domain. The weight of obligation dissolved, supplanted by the airy sensation of authentic connection. Marco's hand, rough yet reassuring, enveloped hers. When their lips met, the villagers' joyful cries resounded around them, a vibrant chorus of love and acceptance. Their future might not be paved with riches, but with something infinitely more precious. Shared laughter, unwavering support, and a love that knew no limitations. The fresh start wasn't merely a change of scenery, but a profound rebirth of the spirit.